Today we're going to talk about Japanese aesthetic. If you are into bonsai, you have probably heard this term before. So let's get into it. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is the Japanese aesthetic when it comes to bonsai. This topic is very broad and there's a lot that could be said about it. And I'm not going to be able to cover everything in just one episode. So if you like this subject, let me know down in the comments below, and maybe we can do more episodes on the Japanese aesthetic. There's many different things that they incorporate into their bonsai design that make it what it is. So over the next couple of episodes, I am going to break these things down and share them with you so you can better understand how to incorporate some of these elements into your own bonsai. So in this episode, I want to start out by talking to you about Wabi Sabi. This is one of my favorite aspects of the Japanese aesthetic, and it is something that I try to incorporate into all of my bonsai designs. Wabi Sabi is a philosophy in traditional Japanese arts that finds beauty and imperfection in transience. It is the acceptance of the imperfect, the broken, or the incomplete. Wabi Sabi literally translates into two separate words, wabi meaning in rustic, quiet beauty, and sabi meaning the beauty of things that age gracefully. Put together, they form the aesthetic ideal for the Japanese garden or the Japanese landscape. When incorporating wabi sabi into your bonsai, you want to look for things such as aged bark, for example, on a pine or a Japanese maple. You might see these beautiful patterns and textures, and you might want to leave some of those exposed by wiring the branches up or carving away some of the bark. Another way that you can incorporate wabi-sabi into your bonsai design is by adding a crack to your pot. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and crack every single pot that you have, but if you happen to have a pot that already has cracks in it, you might want to leave those cracks exposed instead of trying to hide them. Cracks in a pot are perfectly normal because pots are handmade, and sometimes they re-handmade with cracks already in them because they re-going for a certain look. Cracks can also be incorporated with a tree that has been growing in the wild and has grown over something sharp or something that has caused a crack in the tree. These are all things that we would consider wabi-sabi or imperfections that make a tree unique and beautiful. As far as your layout goes, you don't always need to have a perfect symmetrical bonsai. Sometimes an asymmetrical bonsai can be just as beautiful. In fact, most of the time, they are even more interesting than a symmetrical bonsai because they kind of mimic trees that are growing in nature. Nature is never perfectly symmetrical. So why should our bonsai be? Keeping things asymmetrical can add interest to your bonsai. Another thing that I love about the Japanese aesthetic and wabi-sabi is that you don't always have to have a perfectly healthy tree. Sometimes having dead wood or some sort of branch that has died back can actually make your bonsai more beautiful. A good example of this is a tree like a pine where you have a dead branch that has turned completely black. This can add contrast to the overall green color of the tree, and it can make it more interesting to look at. Another good example is things like the Chinese elm. The Chinese elm naturally has these really cool patterns of deadwood running through it, and that's what makes it unique. So when you're designing your bonsai, you don't always have to aim for perfection. Sometimes perfection is boring. Sometimes you need to have some of those imperfections to make your bonsai more interesting. Now, speaking of deadwood is another aspect of the Japanese aesthetic that I am going to break down in its own episode because it is a topic that is worthy of its own discussion. There's many different ways that you can incorporate deadwood into your bonsai, whether it be snags or gin or yakisugi. But again, we're going to cover this in more detail in a future episode. Another element of the Japanese aesthetic is called kintsugi. Kintsugi translates to golden repair. This practice is used when repairing broken pottery by mending the pieces together with gold dust or gold lacquer. Instead of trying to hide the cracks, kintsugi highlights them by making them more beautiful than the actual pottery itself. This is similar to Wabi Sabi because they both focus on finding beauty in imperfection. They both embrace the flaws and imperfections in a piece of art and make them more beautiful because of those flaws and imperfections. One last thing that I want to mention in this episode is the idea of transience. In the world of bonsai, we try to capture a moment in time. We take these living, breathing trees and we try to make them appear as if they're frozen in time. We do this by pruning off the new growth and keeping the tree at a certain size. This is meant to represent the older, more mature trees that you would find in nature that have been growing for hundreds and hundreds of years. When creating a bonsai, you want to remember that it takes years to create a truly great bonsai. It takes patience, dedication, and a love for the art form. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not a disposable piece of art. It's something that you can enjoy for years to come. If you want to learn more about the Japanese aesthetic and how it applies to bonsai, I recommend checking out the book, The Japanese Art of Dwarfing Trees by Peter Chan Keizuka. This book is a great resource for anyone who wants to learn more about the history and philosophy of bonsai. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think is the most important aspect of the Japanese aesthetic when it comes to bonsai? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you liked this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. With that being said, until next time, happy bonsaiing.